Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me today, Fox 40, Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
I am doing quite well indeed. We actually get some Kings items to talk about this week. So, release of the schedule, pretty fun, but overall doesn't really matter. You just get to find your. It's interesting to see how like the in season tournament kind of plays because that's such a new factor. But no, I'm good, guys. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. And of course, Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
Doing well. I'm ready for the schedule release overreactions, the teams that are just hated by the league and the league favorites. Happens every year.
What we'll call them Thursday overreactions. Sean, of course, hates those. Okay, so let's just take care of the business. If you're watching here on YouTube and you don't mind, give us a thumbs up. If you are not a subscriber to the page, please do subscribe. I don't know. We're over 3,000 subscribers. We're growing. We're building. Love it. Everything's going well there. Jump on board with the Kings Beat. Go to thekingsbeat.com, become a premium subscriber so you get invites to everything like the happy hours and all of the content that we create during the season, during the off season, everything else. And it gets delivered right to your inbox, especially while everything is so chaotic on social media right now. And outside of that, it is NBA schedule day. We're going to talk a lot about the schedule today because there's all kinds of fun nuances to this season's schedule. We can start breaking things down, but let's just start with just how is everyone doing? How, Sean, Brenden, what's going on? How are you?
Well, I'm fine. If there's something going on I shouldn't be concerned with. No, I'm still enjoying summer, man. It's been a little warm, which I like, but I went out to a concert earlier this week and it was sweltering. I was melting, but it was like all in good fun. It was a lot of fun. Went and saw Post Malone.
Oh, Brenden, you missed Post Malone, and now you're upset about this.
Yeah, I'm mad that I did not know Post Malone was in the area. I didn't even know of this Toyota amphitheater. I'm not going to lie. I'm still getting used to the area very clearly.
Jesus.
Yeah, I'll stay on my toes.
It's a long way out there.
I am going to some comedy show on Saturday at the Hard Rock, which I remember not hearing great things about, but never been there either.
Whoa, hold on. What do you mean? This guy just comes in firing.
He's just like trashing all of our local spots, Sean.
What do you mean? I thought Sean was the one that said not great things.
No, about the what are you talking about?
The Hard Rock.
No, I was just there. I saw Chris Tucker there earlier this year. I saw Halsey there earlier this year.
Okay.
I feel like I saw some other thing there this year as well. But no, it's a new casino. I'm not really a gambler. I don't like casinos because it's filled with like cigarette smoke. But they do a lot of the new ones do a really good job of kind of getting rid of a lot of that shit that just hovers in the air. So no, I mean, look, fantastic venue, really, man. Like especially because of the Hard Rock and because of what Thunder Valley has done with this brand new music venue. As here we are on Kings Beat talking about all these venues, but in addition to Golden One Center where the Kings play, in addition to the amphitheater, in addition to like Ace of Spades throughout Sacramento, all these music venues are bringing really quality acts. So I would go to those websites and take a look because that's how you find out that Post Malone is in your backyard. Also, Comedy Club, Punchline, fantastic. The night I went to Post Malone for 2 nights, Hassan Minhaj was there doing a small comedy show. It was one of those things that was announced very quickly and sold out very fast. So put your alerts on, pal.
There we go.
I've been to a couple.
What did you hear about the Hard Rock that was so trash?
I thought that you said not great things when you went to Chris Rock.
That's not true.
No. It's just a long way out there.
First of all, it's not a long way. It's driving up to like Marysville, which I get. Not the most certainly not the most convenient, but the amphitheater and Hard Rock are right next to each other. If you've been to the amphitheater, it's great.
Yeah.
Getting out of there could be a bitch. I mean, that is a lot of traffic, but
yeah.
Whew, yeah.
The amphitheater is a lot like it's designed like the Shoreline. Down in Mountain View. So I don't know if you've been to Shoreline, Brenden, but
I have done Shoreline.
Yeah, so if you sit on the hill by like the third song, your underwear severely wedged up your behind, and you slid down the hill at least like 8 feet. And then by the end of the show, everyone is at the bottom of the hill, all squished together because you just keep sliding down the hill. But overall, like it's good to have these venues. And like I told you guys a couple of weeks ago, I went to the Crest to see a concert. Like even that was like, it's such a great venue. The acoustics are incredible, and it's just a fun spot. So I agree, Sean. There are like a lot of cool spots around Sacramento to go hit shows. We've of course got sidetracked, which is something that always happens.
No.
And then of course someone in the comments like, oh, they don't start talking basketball until the 5:47 mark of the podcast.
And it's always the most upvoted comment. It's the funniest thing.
Yeah, well, it's fine. They can do whatever they want. Like, but either way, we don't always get to catch up, especially during the off season, as three friends that covered this crazy Sacramento Kings team. We do have the schedule to talk about, and like my biggest takeaway early on is shock and awe that the Kings are getting recognized for their good season last year with 22 nationally televised games. Now we can him and ha, we can fight over what's nationally televised and what's not, because NBA TV for a lot of people is not nationally televised, because of course they are also on NBC Sports Bay Area or NBC Sports California. But as of right now, from my count, I have them at 6 TNT games, 5 ESPN games, and 11 NBA TV games. And there's this other thing that's hiding within the schedule, within those nationally televised games that I want to point out. Of the 22, I count 16 are at Golden One Center. And so, number one, I just say like hat tip to the Golden One Center crowd, Kings fans, because I think there's nothing worse than watching a nationally televised game where you hear the ball bounce and it's reverberating through the building because there's no fans. So I think the NBA not only rewarded the Kings for their strong play last season, but also rewarded Kings fans by making sure that they were part of the national TV package. What are you guys' thoughts? Brenden, 22 nationally. Well, we can say 11 of full-fledged national television games and 11 of the bonus version with NBA TV.
Yeah, I do kind of put them in different categories, but either way, I think it's obviously great Sacramento is getting this. I think to your point, so many of them being home games is a great opportunity for people to see the environment that is Golden One Center loud every single night, especially when they're given something to cheer about like they were last year. And the Kings are just really entertaining. They're one of the best offenses and one of the worst defenses, which means you're going to get a lot of buckets and chaos. Really, they were top 10 in clutch games, had the clutch player of the year last year, a lot of games going down to the wire. I think just a lot of athletes and a style of play that's really entertaining to watch with that high pace. So it makes sense. I'm a little surprised that it's that number already, but I do think it's understandable. They play a fun brand of basketball, and this is also the league kind of betting that they're going to stay good.
Staying good.
I think it's exactly what we talked about. I mean, there's people who are pissed off in recent years that they're not on national TV. And by the way, I do consider NBA TV national TV. I am one of those people that do, because I'm sorry, like I don't care if you're still on your home market. Like that opens, that gives eyeballs for free. Well, obviously with a cable package, a basic cable package, or whatever streaming service you might have, but that gives people a glimpse into your full game, and you're rewarded for that. I thought there'd be a lot of flexing in the schedule. I had some people tell me that was something that they had expected and was pitching for, and I think the league said, okay, we'll earn it, like prove us wrong, and the Kings did. I mean, getting third in the West, having an excited brand of basketball that we witnessed, and then you have all the accolades, as Brenden mentioned, with the clutch player of the year. You've got all NBA, you've got the coach of the year, you got executive of the year, and then you have this incredible playoff series that goes 7 games with a dynasty type team that's kind of nearing the end of its rope for the most part. And it's just so fun, and so you're being rewarded for that. They're like, okay, they're going to schedule it, and it's King's job to keep those games because as I mentioned, they can be flexed out. So I don't expect them to. I think that we all expect them to still play the exciting brand of basketball, and hey man, you got that beam that was really gimmicky and people want to see it. So that playing on the home court in front of a rabid fan base is going to be fun. It's exactly what the NBA wants, even if it is a small market, and that's the NBA likes to show off their small markets oftentimes during the regular season. So I'm thrilled for Kings fans because they finally have something to celebrate. It's been a while since you've had this much attention on the team, and a lot of positive attention, I'll add. And now it's up to the team to make sure it's all warranted, and they get to keep it, and they're deserving of it. So kudos to them. It'll be a fun season ahead, and there's certainly some little things to maybe talk about within the schedule, but I think that the national TV audience and attention is going to be very much welcomed by Kings fans when they look at the full schedule, which comes out really soon.
Yeah. Okay. So let's touch base on a couple of things. Number one, the Kings are up to, like, again, it's 22. That's what I'm seeing. They can be flexed out of games, but you're not going to get flexed out of 22. There's possibility for, to get flexed out of quite a few, but not that many. So if they don't just completely come out and stumble and really struggle, a lot of their games are in, November and December. They have a ton late in the season as well. And we'll get into some of the nuances of the schedule, but I want to make sure people understand that last season, I believe the number was 44 games that the Golden State Warriors were on national television. And so, like, this number might sound huge to Kings fans, but it's like the first step of being a good team and getting some recognition. The next step is to get a whole bunch more of these games. And so I just want to point that out. There's also some anomalies to the schedule. Like, there's only 80 games as of right now because of the in-season tournament. The in-season tournament is going to take place in early December. And so there's, the Kings will have some of those games to contend with. They'll have to figure out whether they're like a high-seeded team or a low-seeded team. If they don't make the in-season tournament, then they get 2 regular season games during this little window in December. So that's something to point out. Outside of that, just looking at the games that they are on national television, I don't see a single bad team that they're playing. I mean, if we're going to say who didn't make the playoffs, the Mavs are the only team that I see that the Kings are playing on national television. They have a March 26th game on TNT. They have a March 29th game against the Mavs on NBA TV. Outside of that, and we all know that, of course, the NBA loves Luka. The only other game where the Kings are playing a non-playoff team is early in the season when, as part of the in-season tournament, they're one of the highlighted Friday night games where they're playing on ESPN against the Spurs. And so the rest of the games are all against Golden State, Lakers, Clippers, Denver, Celtics, Suns, like the Heat, Sixers. Like, last season, the one real national television game the Kings had, they got flexed out of because the Houston Rockets were so bad that they didn't want that on like a Tuesday night. That's not going to happen this year with the rest of the teams that they're playing. So I think that's also a nod of respect for this team. I guess the question is, like, what are you guys looking for when you are looking at the schedule, when you're breaking it down? And is there certain things that, like, catch your eye, or that you're like, okay, I want to know how bad this schedule is in this way or that way? Is there something that jumps out?
Absolutely. You look at least for me, and I don't have it conveniently. It's on my phone. I don't have it conveniently laid out in front of me, but I will say I look at the amount of back-to-backs. I look at the amount of 3 and 4 nights, and I look at the holidays to see, obviously where the team will be around the holidays. Do they have any holiday games? And then lastly, to me, I like to see the longest road trip, longest homestand, and if there's a good balance, or if there's a, boy, you're going to have the majority of your schedule, the majority of your home games in the first half or the second half of the season. Things like that are things that catch my eye when I look at the schedule.
Yeah, Brenden?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to add. I'm curious to see how the in-season tournament gets laid out for sure this year, and the whole 80 games. I'm curious to see like what that chunk of time looks like and how they leave that flexibility open for those final two, based on if Sacramento does make it into that next round of the play-in or not. But I mean, that's typically the same stuff for me. I think back-to-backs and like, are you playing the more difficult team on the second night or the first? What the travel is like in between those back-to-backs at times. Definitely looking for that one long East Coast road trip. Or there would be a couple, but typically one extremely long road trip. And I wouldn't have thought of the holidays, but that definitely makes a lot of sense. And do you have a preference of like if they're home or away on the holidays?
Personally, I don't. I really don't care because my life doesn't really change that much. So from a selfish standpoint, but even the Kings have been blessed to be at least around the Christmas holiday. They're usually home in recent memory. They've always been kind of home for the holiday, so that part doesn't really matter.
Yeah, this year, I mean, they have a back-to-back on the 22nd and 23rd of December, and then they play again on the 26th of December, but they've got the 24th and the 25th off. They're on the road around Thanksgiving. They play the day before and the day after Thanksgiving. Outside of that, like, I don't think that there's a lot of other holidays that fall into this question. And then
Like New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day,
oh, they do play
MLK,
New Year's
like
Eve.
that.
Yeah, they do
Right.
play. I think they play Memphis New Year's Eve. They're off New Year's Day.
Right.
Okay, so you guys asked about back-to-backs. This season, they have a total of 15 back-to-backs. Of those, 6 are home and home, which is always weird because that's something new. 6 are road and road. 1 is home and road, and 2 are road and home. And of those games, the one thing I would point out that's really interesting, they play the Utah Jazz on the first game of the season. That's opening night in Utah, October 25th at the Delta Center. They do not have another road game in Utah, which is spectacular because that is one of the worst back-to-backs in the league. And they don't have a customary where it's typically you play in Utah one night and then you either fly home or you fly to Phoenix or you fly somewhere else. And the whole entire trip usually wipes you out. They don't have that on the schedule, which to me is really good. So again, a 6-6 split on home and homes and road and roads. I think that's fair. The other 3 games, the 2 that are road and home, and the one that's home and road, one of the games is in California the whole time. So from what I could see, so even if it's like you play at home one night and you play in LA the next, I think that's one. You play in LA one night and you come back home. Like, so they're all moderate, which is good to see. What else? What other stats that I have of these? The road trips. Okay, so the beginning on January 25th in Golden State, the Kings have a 7-game, 12-day road trip. If you add on the travel days, it's more like a 14-day trip. And it's all over the place. They also have a 6-game road trip in November. And they have one 5-game road trip in January. Their November schedule is pretty ridiculous. So that's one thing I would point out. November, they have 14 games. 5 of them are at home and 9 of them are on the road, including one of those big road trips. And then the Kings, for some reason, always have a big road trip in January. This year, they have 2 road trips in January that are substantial. I believe it's a 5-game and then the 6-game that the 7-game that leads into February is also on the road. When you look at those things, Sean, you mentioned earlier, like, are you hoping for a lighter schedule earlier? If you're looking at home and road splits, would you rather have a bunch of road games early in the season or a bunch of road games late in the season?
It's a good question. I think you just try to hopefully find balance. I think if you remember last year's schedule, for example, I believe it was February where there was like 3 home games.
Yeah.
Which is, you never want that. And again, it that sounds jarring, but when you really think about it, you had 2 of them, I think, in the first week of February, and then 1 at the end of February. And the reason being is, yes, you do have road trips, but you have the All-Star break, so that obviously takes a good chunk of your schedule out. So you want more balance than that, though. I feel like the league does a really good job of especially when we talk about back-to-backs. They've limited those. Those come down substantially from what they used to be. The 3 and 4 nights have come down even, I mean, way more than they used to. They used to
And
have
they
3 and 4
eliminated the
nights.
4 and 5.
The 4 and 5 is brutal.
Brutal.
So yeah, I mean, if I had my pick, and you're a team like the Kings historically are, this season, I don't know that. I've kind of said that I think they could take a step back in the wins column and still maybe end up being a better team by virtue of a decent playoff run. But those upper tier teams, the start of the season doesn't really have to be special, if you will. You can kind of make up ground later in the season. But for a team, in my opinion, that's a little bit more of the up and coming team, and took the league by surprise a little bit last year, and yeah, they finished 3rd, which is fantastic. But I still feel the Kings have their best success if they take advantage of the early schedule, when teams might not be at their best yet. And that's what's going to be interesting to see, is if this tournament plays a factor. This in-season tournament plays a factor in that. So I would say for the Kings, having the strength of schedule, you want it to have you want to get out of the gate hot. And typically, let's face it, the road has actually been a better recipe for success for the Kings than home court has. Maybe this is the year where that changes a little bit. Hopefully that happens, because as Alvin Gentry said before Mike Brown, and Dave Yeager said before them, it's like you want to take care of home cooking. That's it's so hard to win on the road, and it's been kind of an anomaly that the Kings have had success on the road for the better part of 2 seasons. So yeah, we'll see how that shakes down.
I think.
Yeah, and I'm going to point out to finish Sean's point there. The Kings were 25-16 at home on the road last year, and 23-18 on the road. I mean, at home. So they had a better road record than they had home record, which is a total anomaly. That's never happened. So go ahead, Brenden.
Yeah, and I think like starting hot, to Sean's point, holds even more truth this year with the continuity that this roster has. Like when you bring back as many guys as you did, and you have such a similar look, I think that you have an advantage at the beginning of the year compared to some teams that maybe need to take a little bit more time to mesh. And that's not to say they're not going to obviously implement new things. And there's a couple of new guys that have to get accustomed. But I would think that beginning of the year that they have a little bit of a leg up on some of these other teams that have to get accustomed to new guys. And then the other thing that does kind of stand out to me is I feel like the Northeast road trip, typically, I mean, you're playing a lot of really good teams, but I feel like the Kings have kind of struggled on that trip. Like they've gotten smacked by Boston a couple years in a row. And selfishly, as a guy that has a lot of Celtics friends still, I get a lot of crap every year. So I would love for them to, at least have a competitive game in Boston. Philly, they typically, I feel like, come out on the wrong side of that one. And then you have good like Milwaukee and Cleveland in there as well. And you only play those teams twice. You're only going to go there one time all year. That Northeast road trip stands out to me a lot.
Yeah, and just for Brendan's point, I mean, the Kings don't play Boston until really late in the season. They play them in April, and it's on the second night of a back-to-back. They play the Knicks and then the Celtics the next night. But that trip is a little strange, because then they go to Brooklyn, and then they go to OKC, which is odd that you're flying back. And it's in the last couple of games of the season. Then they finish a back-to-back at home against New Orleans and Phoenix, and then they finish at home on April 14th against Portland. Yeah, so I get what you're saying, Brenden. Those road trips where you're playing really solid high-end teams, those aren't always easy, and the Kings have not fared well against the beasts of the East. That's usually a problem. So I'm kind of the opinion, like what Sean said, like you're going to trudge through the early part of the season. I think the early part of the season is where really, really, really good teams usually don't care as much. And so they're just trying to get themselves ready for the stretch run. And it brings me to a point that the Kings play, like Sean talked about last year, 3 games in February. And I think the weird thing about February was they were like the 2nd and the 3rd, and then like the 28th, right? So there was this huge stretch where we didn't see the team. This year, they play 4 games in February and at home in February, 12 total. So they do have another 8 road games in February. But in March, this is when I always feel like the bad teams in the NBA are on the road most of March and April, because they're like, hey, it doesn't really matter anyways. We're just going to throw them out there, and whatever happens to them as your playoff teams are ramping up. It's usually unbalanced. This year, the Kings have 11 home games in the month of March out of their 16. And then their April is split 4-4. To me, that's another like scheduling anomaly that points to the NBA having at least some belief in the Sacramento Kings, that they're actually going to be a solid NBA team, because usually you don't have that many, especially after the All-Star break, that last 25 games of the season when a lot of teams cash it in. The Kings have a ton of home games. Does that say anything to you, Sean?
I see you working there. Honestly, no. I mean, I would kind of lean into more of that if there was like ABC games, for example, having some of those marquee matchups and having the league having that belief. I don't necessarily think it has much to do with that. I do think that they try to find some attractive nationally televised games for a team that is going to make a playoff run. So I see it working there. But honestly, if you're not really on ABC, I don't see the league really doing you much favor. It's just kind of like you've got to schedule these games, and if you're on the road so much, early on, then it's going to balance out eventually.
Brenden?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make too much of a difference to me. I mean, I do think later in the year, there definitely can be more interest, and it is intriguing to me to see like the end of the schedule of when you're playing Western Conference teams that, it's hard to predict this far out, because there's always unexpected teams that are worse or better than what they project. But, you can kind of look and project that, okay, this is going to be a really important game towards the end of the year. And I think those being nationally televised, will probably draw more eyes. So I do definitely see the logic there.
Okay. Yeah, so in March, they have 4 nationally televised games, but an ESPN, a TNT, and 2 NBA TVs. In April, of their 8 games in April, 4 of them are nationally televised, including 2 on TNT, the Clippers and Pelicans, and then 2 on NBA TV, which are the Celtics and Suns. Overall, I mean, I think it's a pretty intriguing, I like the fact that they're going to be home, that they're going to have an opportunity to gain some ground late in the season with a home schedule. Now, again, they've got to take care of home cooking, which they haven't done in the past. So that kind of points to like a bigger issue, right? Like if the Kings can't figure out how to protect home court, then it doesn't matter that you have 16 nationally televised games at home. It doesn't matter. Like you have to win those games, and that's a big deal. So I definitely think that like there's a possibility here that we're seeing like the beginning of something, and certainly some respect from the league when it comes to schedule.
Is there any like a player coming back to SAC that stands out to you guys? Like the Indiana game will be fun always, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess Rashawn coming back to SAC could be fun with Dallas.
Yeah, they play Rashawn a bunch of times. It feels like, yeah, I did pencil in when I think it's January 18th. They play against Indiana at home. So that's, of course, Buddy and Tyrese coming back. Sean, do those games mean anything more to you? Is there someone else that you're like really looking forward to seeing outside of? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, Victor Wembanyama. I think that's going to be
Yeah.
the one where you want to see when he makes his first appearance in Sacramento. I had the date. I just don't have it in front of me at the moment. But yeah, I think that'll be fun. I mean, I think fans, especially if Summer League and all that was any indication of just how much people are looking forward to seeing this guy play, that'll be a good matchup or a good moment. I mean, I know they got the national TV game with Spurs pretty early on, so that'll be a nice first glimpse. But having that moment, James, if you have it there, that date was what?
It's February 22nd, and it's
Right.
the first game coming out of the All-Star break at home. So
Yeah.
February 22nd, and then they have a couple of days off. Then they play, again, this is what I was talking about earlier. They play the Clippers in LA, and then a back-to-back back at home against Miami. Just kind of an interesting scheduling anomaly.
And the other one too is that I had made a note of that I just don't have in front of me is the Thunder. I mean, Chet Holmgren. I mean, he was kind of the Wembanyama of last year and coming off of an injury, and he played very, very well at Summer League. And I think there's still a lot of curiosity about him. So two of those players that may not be come to the forefront of people, and of course, obviously with LeBron, people want to see LeBron. So I think people make reference of when he'll come through, and that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Warriors games will have a little something extra, I think.
Oh, they're gonna be spicy.
Those
are spicy games. Yeah.
Chris and Keegan playing, I think, will be a little bit notable. Okay. And then the other one that stands out to me is Joel Embiid hasn't played in Golden One Center since February 2021.
Right.
He's missed the last 2 years.
Okay. So some of these things, Brenden, you guys brought up the Warriors. The first 3 games, I believe, are either ESPN or TNT. So they open against Utah Jazz. They come home. Their home opener is October 27th against the Warriors on ESPN. It's a Friday night game. You asked about LeBron James. They play 2 days later on Sunday. So October 29th. Their 3 games in October are the Jazz in Utah, and then the Warriors and Lakers at home. Then they play the Warriors again to open November. So that's the one game. It's at Golden State that is not televised nationally. So that's something I would definitely point to. And then, so their first 6 games, Utah, Golden State, LA, Golden State again. Then they travel to Houston for 2 games. They're not back to back, but 2 games in a row against the Rockets. And then they come back for Portland. So you'll get to see Scoot Henderson and Chris Murray on the 8th of November. OKC, you don't have to wait long for that. So Chet Holmgren comes in on the 10th of November. And then the Cavs are on the 13th of November. And then they take off for one of their, that's a 6-game road trip. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, there are some games that will circle, and I want to see Chet Holmgren. I think that's really interesting. I also I want to see Paolo Banchero against Keegan Murray. That to me is still intriguing. I don't really care to see Jaden Ivey or the Detroit Pistons roll through Sacramento. That doesn't have much appeal. But anyway, I think some of those games are kind of cool highlights.
The Detroit game last year was actually pretty fun.
It was great. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, we get to see Marvin. Yeah.
Well, maybe.
Shots fired.
Yeah, well. And it's funny, the Chris Murray, the Chris Murray mention was I was thinking about that, and I was like, shoot, he may not play, and I don't know, maybe that's just it. Some of those guys, obviously health is a concern, but I was thinking about that. I was like, man, will Chris Murray play? Would he be a rotational player for that team? I would hope so, based on, but I think they're going to have some pretty high hopes over there. And even though I don't think they're very good, but trying to duplicate that, I mean, if you remember last year, Portland going into the season, people were excited for them, oh, they can be really good. Who's going to be better, the Kings or the Blazers? And that became pretty silly conversation very quickly.
Well, actually, I think, didn't the Kings lose to the Blazers on opening night?
They did, yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why, yeah.
Yeah, so we started to see even the buzz build, and look, I still think we're gonna wait and see what happens there, but that franchise is on the precipice of disaster or a hard reboot. I wouldn't say disaster because I like a lot of their young players.
They need a hero.
Oh, they got one.
No, he's saying they HE.
Oh, I know what he's doing. Yeah, I know what he's doing.
They do have one. They do have one, to be fair.
That's basically in the bag. They need a hero and then some.
True.
Yeah. Yeah,
need
I'm
more
not
than
sure.
a hero, my guy.
They need more than a hero. Yeah, I think that franchise is at an interesting position in sort of who and what they are, and so and then I think the other one is like the James Harden situation, which is just a nightmare. That's turning into like one of those grand debacles that the NBA loves to have. I don't know. So I want to see if he if he actually gets his wishes and upsets the balance in the Western Conference. And I don't know that he upsets it in a good way, but upsets it. So I'm like, I don't know about you guys, but if he ends up on the Los Angeles Clippers, are you okay with that? Because that doesn't seem like it's a bad deal for the Kings.
I mean, I still think he's pretty good, but the Clippers will always be like the hypothetical best team in the NBA.
Paper champs.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I'm still not writing off a James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George team.
Russell Westbrook.
And by the way, I'm not either, because this is the year where, like it or not, they have to. Like you're pot committed. It hasn't worked, but they haven't been healthy, and they haven't been able to have their full slate of guys. And you need Kawhi and you need Paul George, and hopefully this is the year where they can play in basically every game together. And I say hopefully for Clipper fans, but I'd like to see it as an NBA fan myself. So they made that move so long ago, and this might be the year where it finally bears fruit, and you get to see what it finally is supposed to look like.
And if not,
well, then
Paul George to the Kings.
Blow it
up. Let me see. Do we have any other interesting tidbits? Sacramento Kings have 2 6-game homestands, one in December and one in March. They also have a 5-game homestand that runs from late March to early April. These are notes that I took. We talked about back-to-backs. The month breakdown is pretty intriguing. In October, they play 3, 2 at home, 1 on the road. In November, they play 14 games, 5 at home, 9 on the road. But again, a couple of games against teams like Houston and San Antonio, which should be at least intriguing because you have an opportunity for wins there on the road. December, they have 12 games, which is 8 at home and 4 on the road. But they also have the in-season tournament. And so that is yet to be determined. So I guess the in-season tournament, the 8 best teams go for like a single elimination tournament, and then the rest of the league has extra games scheduled, 2 extra games scheduled during that gap. And from what I can tell, 1 is home and 1 is road. And then let's see, January, 6 home games, 9 road games. February, 4 home games. We got 12 total, 12 4 home games, 8 road games, 16 in March, which 11 of which are at home, and then split right down the middle, 8 in April with 4 at home, 4 on the road. We've talked about guys that you guys want to see come in. Like, is there anyone else? Like, I like the Chet Holmgren one. I hadn't thought about that because I think that team is going to be really fun to watch. That OKC team. OKC. There we go.
The OKC team.
Yeah.
For me, it's teams like Milwaukee and Boston. I think that'll be. Those are always fun to see, especially with a player like Jason Tatum, who is such a stud in this league, and Giannis, who is going to be who's always in the MVP conversation. But we didn't even mention like the defending champs. First time Denver rolls through. That's always, I think, no matter what sport you're looking at, if you get the defending champs on your schedule, and obviously the Kings will, because in the NBA you play everyone coming through your building. So that's always fun to see.
Yeah, that's a Saturday night game. The first time they roll through is December 2nd, Saturday night on NBA TV. And, of course, I expect Michael Malone to try to have the ring ceremony in Sacramento. And if not, nothing else, he'll wear his ring and then a big giant ring shirt and then a Suck It Vivek shirt underneath that. But Brenden, what else you got?
All the divisional games are always fun. I like little stuff like Corey Joseph being on the Warriors is fun to me. I don't know how much Corey Joseph's going to play, but or like Chimezie Metu being on the Suns. I like the idea of former teammates kind of jawing at each other a little bit mid-game. I think that is always fun, even if it's talking to the bench or anything like that. So that's fun to me. I think Memphis, already being known as a team that talks a lot of shit and is super hard-nosed, and then you add Marcus Smart to that. I think that Memphis is definitely going to be an intriguing one. Yeah, I can't think of much else outside of that. Definitely Joel Embiid has stood out to me every year. I've wanted to see Joel Embiid the last 2 years. Has not happened. I would love to see Joel Embiid in Golden One Center.
It's interesting you bring up Memphis because, of course, Jaw's out the first 25 games of the season, right? Although he's appealed that, right? So I think they're hoping that the NBA will reduce that, but I think it's less. I mean, I think it'll be that. Yeah, it's funny. The schedule just got released as we're sitting here. I'm trying to see if there's another when they play Memphis December 31st in Memphis, and then I don't think that they play them again until I see them in March. I think they might only have one home game against Memphis. That's interesting, but they should at least be past their suspension stuff the first time the Kings play them. Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the business of basketball. We've got all these national televised games, and I think nationally televised games, like, Kings fans are getting rewarded. The Kings are getting rewarded. They're not getting rewarded like the Lakers or the Warriors, where they've got 40-something games, but I think 22 is like a huge starting point, and it's probably like 5 or 6 more than I thought they would get at a minimum. I did not think that they would be this high, but I think my biggest question is, what do you think it means for the Kings to get all of these games? And I don't mean as a franchise. I think as a franchise, it's huge, right? But for individual players who are now going to go from obscurity in Sacramento of maybe getting like 4 total games a year, where including NBA TV, and a lot of those get bumped, to all of a sudden they're going to be on a national stage all the time. And we have Bleacher Report come out with one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen, where they claim that Domantas Sabonis is the most overrated player in the league, which I thought was an embarrassing piece to write for a player who just made the All NBA team, and who led a team to 18 more wins than they had the previous season. But now there won't be an excuse. Like, everyone will actually have seen the Sacramento Kings from around the league. Anyone who watches NBA TV or ESPN or TNT, they will have seen the Kings, because the Kings are going to be on TV nonstop. I mean, there was 1 week early in the season where the Kings are on TV Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And it's like the Cavs, the Lakers, and the Spurs. Like, you're going to get to see the Kings, and you will not have an excuse to say, well, maybe all I did watch was playoffs. But do you think this means something more to guys like De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, who are trying to cement themselves as long-term All-Stars or long-term All-NBA players? Or do you think it's just like part of the process?
Oh, no, it's only good can come of it. You're playing on that stage, and you want to, all it really means is that 2 things. You are a successful NBA product. You are a good team, and you are, in my opinion, you play an exciting brand of basketball that people want to see. And typically, when you play an exciting brand of basketball, it usually leads to at least some sort of sustained success. And being a part of a winning basketball program is going to give you eyes, and you're being rewarded for it. And what it does is it shows, especially for some of these young guys who, there's a lot of young guys that are still on the Kings that are just kind of stepping into that veteran area. But, I like De'Aaron Fox is a young vet. He's still a young, but there's a level that De'Aaron Fox could still get to. He's coming off of a career year, first All-Star appearance, first winning season, first playoffs, all that kind of stuff. So I even say, even for a guy like him coming off that year, this year could even be potentially a larger one, and put him in front of people's eyes. I saw our buddy Zach Lowe talk about him as an underrated MVP candidate. Certainly Domantas Sabonis was that as well. I mean, he finished in, I believe it was top 5 last year, in MVP voting. So
I think he was 7. He was
7, or excuse me,
yeah,
7.
Sabonis was 7.
Yeah.
Yep.
My bad. So yeah, but I mean, having guys like that in the discussion, and you get those type of accolades and attention based off of your national TV audience, and it's not just fans. And then let's be honest, it's not necessarily national TV; it's international TV. I mean, the All-Star voting is all over the place, and the global game that is the NBA that's no small feat. I mean, it's all over the place. I was looking at a note just a minute ago. NBA games and programming are available in 214 countries and territories in more than 50 languages. So, only good can come of that. But as you see with certain players who are the lightning rods, and people who think that guys like James Harden and Kyrie Irving, or pick your poison, could, whatever player could be overrated. I mean, you can also enter that fray. So it yes, attention is good, but it also brings some scrutiny along the way as well.
You got the Dominican Republic tuning in for Chris Duarte. You got Portugal tuning in for Nemanja
Ricardo
Skeda.
Brito Reyes, calling games all night long, and now he'll actually get NBA TV and TNT and ESPN games to work with. Go ahead, Brenden.
You got
Canada.
Bulgaria for Sasha, with probably some Greece thrown in there as well. You
Lithuania,
Canada, Lithuania,
yeah.
Nigeria,
Spain.
Oh yeah,
Jordy,
yeah.
Well, no, even for Domas. I mean, Lithuania and Spain; those are hyphenated for him. So
yeah, it's interesting, right? I think that you're going to be able to see the Kings on a more global stage for sure, but the players themselves will be able to expand their brands. And that's a good thing. You want your players to have success both on the court and off the court. And I think having a magnifying glass is big, but I also think it's a driving force as well. I mean, the Kings have 11 nationally televised games before the All-Star break. That gives De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis 11 games to show who they are to a national audience and gain more votes. It also, on a Tuesday night, if you're not really filling up for a game, and you look on the schedule and you're on TNT, all of a sudden things change. You're in a different mindset. You're amped up to go play that game. And so I think it especially for a guy how about Malik Monk, who should be able to get some 6 man of the year votes, but also is in a contract here. You can see those games becoming huge for him. And I feel the one guy I feel bad for is Terrence Davis, who
I was going to say the worst time to give him up.
Yeah, TNT TD, he always played big on the national stage, which I don't what does that mean? That means he played big 3 times a year. Yeah, because the national stage never came to Sacramento. But he's the one guy who, even Brenden, you brought up. I think it is kind of a strange thing that if you look at the Kings roster, they brought back so many players that there are only 2 guys that I think are in the league that are one is on a different team in Chimezie Metu, and the other is Terrence Davis, who's a free agent still, but there isn't another player that they're going to run up against. Guys like Chima Moneki are overseas, or KZ Okpala, or Matthew Dellavedova. They're not in the league right now. So there's not going to be a bunch of games where you're playing against former teammates, at least from last year. I think the Suns are the only game that you can really circle.
Yeah, and I'll just say I do think there is a potential downside. Last year was a big step in changing the narrative around the Kings, getting rid of the Kings stigma, but it was still just a step. That's not gone. It's not that far in the rear view. And if the Kings came out and, got smacked around on a nationally televised game, somebody hasn't watched many Kings games, and be like, oh yeah, it's the Kings. There is still work to be done in my mind to break that stigma, because it's not that far removed.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all big, and we're going to get to see the Kings get to prove a lot of people wrong or prove people right. If they don't play well, the national spotlight will be shining brightly on them. Okay. We'll have more on the schedule. I'll have a post up here in not too long on the Kings beat with some of the breakdowns that we've already talked about today. This will go up. It'll be a nice reaction to the NBA schedule coming out. But while we were on the pod, it actually broke. They actually put everything out there. Maybe there's a couple of tidbits of information that we missed. I'm not going to sit here and read you all 80 games that are on the schedule right now, and then minus the 2 for the in-season tournament. But the schedule's out. It's fun. This is a good day for the NBA today, that where people are going to hash over a million different things and try to break everything down and find our nuances and have some pluses and minuses, and we'll see how the Kings schedule fares against other teams.
How about one thing that I think people would really like to hear, and that's when tickets go on sale, and that would be August 18th, Friday, August 18th, and then they do a pre-sale access, and that's available kings.com/presale, and then they have 10 game plans and all kinds of plans available. But take a look at them, because you've seen these flex prices and you know how things can be. So Friday, August 18th, pre-sale access, kings.com/presale, and then kings.com/10 game plan for their ticket plans that are available. So
okay, and that's tomorrow.
Yeah,
just so
that is tomorrow.
And if there are pre-sales, you might even have those in your inbox already if they're going to drop in pre-sales for tickets. It's definitely a big thing for the Kings, and I would point out too, the Kings, not only did they sold out all of their season ticket packages. So as of right now, they are sold out of.
I think he saw the freeze coming.
He did. He saw it. It was like the Titanic that couldn't get out of the way of the iceberg. I mean, he saw it there. And he's back.
I'm back. Stupid internet.
We just said you saw the freeze coming. You saw you were the Titanic heading towards the iceberg and couldn't get out of the way.
That's funny. So I'll just point out, Kings have sold out of season ticket packages, from what I've heard. They now have a waiting list for season ticket packages, but they also reserve a bunch of seats for single games and like what we're talking about, the 10 game packages. I would guess that the 10 game packs are going to sell out. So if you're interested in season tickets, I would go, or you're interested in 10 game packs, I'd go buy them. It's a pretty big, this thing's taken off quickly. And if there's one thing Kings fans have always proven, is that when the team is any good at all, they show up in mass. I think 19 of the first 20 seasons, they sold out 100% of the games. The only season was, I think, the 97-98 season, where they had been good and then fell apart after Brian Grant left. So yeah, this team is building again. So if you're going to get in the building, you better go get your seats relatively quick. All right. Do we have any final thoughts? Brenden, let's start with you. What do you got? Final thoughts?
I got to talk to Keon Ellis the other day for a little while, and wrote up an article for the Kings Herald. Talked about a handful of different things, kind of went through what he learned from different coaches throughout the course of the year, Bobby Jackson, Mike Brown, and Lindsey Harding, somebody he worked pretty closely with, and how he feels about Lindsey being head coach going into next year. Some things in there about, what he's working on as an individual. And I think the one thing kind of want to highlight is that he mentioned there's a good group of guys that are all working out together fairly often, and includes, De'Aaron Fox, Keegan Murray, Davion Mitchell, and those guys being a little in and out. Obviously, Keegan, Team USA, Davion, I think, has gone overseas or gone back to Baylor, and De'Aaron just went overseas. But outside of that, it's been Keon, Kessler Edwards, Colby Jones, Jalen Slauson, Jordan Ford, lots of guys getting together and all working out, which I think is always great to hear in an off season.
That is good to hear. Sean, what he didn't mention Malik, right? It seems like, well, Sean, you talked to Malik last week, but it seems like Malik has been in Sacramento quite a few times this summer.
Yeah, and he's been back in Arkansas as well. But these guys, this is kind of like their last remaining weeks of the NBA offseason, even though training camp doesn't begin to that first week of October. September is when they kind of all, fly in and get back into their normal routines and occupy the training facility. So yeah, they're gonna be all over the place. And then right around the first week of September, some guys get in earlier. I think you'll see another couple trickle in by the second week, but September is when they all kind of come in. So it's fun because it's right around the corner. It seems like there's still quite a bit of off season left, which is a good thing, for at least for me. And as I kind of slide into a lot of football, high school football for me, and you got the colleges right around the corner, and of course the NFL training camps continuing. So a lot of Niners, much more high school football, and it's fun time of year. It's a nice little refresh until it starts to get a little chilly in the air, and then basketball season's right there. So looking forward to it.
Gonna need Trey Lance to pick it up.
Well, yeah, I mean he's
third
in the depth chart.
Yeah, come on now.
You don't like that, right?
I just want to see Trey Lance. Like,
yeah,
I like what's the future with Sam Darnold? Like,
well,
figuring out your two right now, but
James and I were on the radio a little over a week ago. We were talking about it, and it's like, boy, if you're Trey Lance and then you're the Niners and you ship out all this capital to bring him in, and you still have some questions. Maybe they don't have questions, but it's not a good sign that when you bring in a guy like Sam Darnold, who has been a serviceable quarterback on some pretty bad teams. I think he's a talented quarterback, but when you hear Kyle Shanahan, if you're Trey Lance and you hear your coach go, oh yeah, there's a lot of Steve Young there, and you're comparing him to a Hall of Famer who's, like, in my mind, one of the faces of the 49er franchise over times, that's not a good thing. You're third. So
it's funny, like when I watched him in their preseason opener, and watching preseason football is the worst thing you can possibly do to make any sort of, it's like watching summer league basketball, right? Yep. But at the same time, there are things that you can see. And the thing that I will point out is it's the same exact issue that I've always had with Marvin Bagley. It's not that I don't think Marvin Bagley's talented. I think Marvin Bagley's tremendously talented and has all the potential in the world. The problem is that, like, he never played more than 20 straight games until his final year in Sacramento. And I think he ended up playing 24 straight. Like, you can see a player that hasn't been on the field. It's one thing to throw the ball to moving targets and to work on your arm strength and work on your delivery and work on all this stuff. It's a whole nother thing to be in game action, because it's not that he's making a bunch of mistakes and throwing interceptions. It's at the game speed. I mean, he's getting sacked the whole time. And sure, it was a second team line that he was playing behind, but it's also a second team defensive line a lot of the time that he was playing against. And he just didn't make quick decisions. And the quick decisions he didn't make were the things that you see from young players that are inexperienced. And this is a third-year guy. And that's why Sam Darnold, doesn't matter how good he is as a starter, he still has 55 games of NFL experience as a starter under his belt. And that experience, like, teaches you how to handle things like a defensive line coming at you and not stepping in and making mistakes. So, you make it, you don't make it. That's the way then NFL works, just like the NBA. Like, either you're good enough or you're not good enough. Either you're, especially at the quarterback position, your brain works fast enough or it doesn't. And, he's behind the 8 ball because the other 2 quarterbacks he's competing with, one has a bunch of experience and one of them gets it. And that's a problem. So
Brandon Allen might be 3. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not saying trade him. I'm saying, like, this is about winning a Super Bowl. It's not about one player. And that means that, it's the same thing with the Kings. It's about winning games. It's not about one player. And we're not going to wait around for, it doesn't matter who it is. Like, we could compare Trey Lance to Nemias Queta, and, like, except for Nemias Queta hasn't got injured, but the team isn't going to wait around and see if you're good enough to play. You got to prove you're good enough to play. And that's it. Like, unfortunately for some of these young guys. Sean, was that your final thought?
I think so. Yeah. I'm just empty up here. I have no thoughts running through my mind other than a lot of upcoming assignments that have to deal with the football. So looking forward to it.
I want to, like, 2 seconds, send thoughts and prayers to our friends over at KCRA who lost one of their producers this last week. Tragic accident at, I believe, Folsom Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thoughts and prayers out to the family and to our friends at KCRA. Those things are horrible to deal with, and a really, really sad day for everyone over there. Outside of that, stick with us. We'll have a whole bunch more coming up. This is the off season, and it's hot. I don't even understand how hot it is, and it's not cooling down at night. Those are the worst days for me. I'm okay with the heat.
It does down here. It does down here. Like in the nighttime, you get a nice breeze. That's been.
It was like 86 at 11 o'clock last night. Like here,
yeah.
That's not. I mean, because I like to open up the house, turn on the whole house fan, suck all that heat out, get it all out of the attic, and there's no way to do it when it's still flaming hot outside. All right. Well, we've got the schedule covered for you. You'll have more on that as we post stuff throughout the day. Make sure you're following Sean and Brenden. They too will have their own coverage in a different way of the NBA schedule getting released. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. If you're still watching, you don't mind, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel, give us a rating and review wherever you're listening to your podcast. Go to thekingsbeat.com and become a premium subscriber to the Kings Beat. We got all kinds of crazy stuff coming up. It's going to be a fun season of Kings basketball kicking off on October 25th against Utah Jazz at the Delta Center. So for Box 40, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast, I'm James Hammer, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. See you very soon.